The cafeteria air is heavy with the scent of sloppy joes and yellow sheet cake as Tamika navigates the maze of long rectangular tables. Her own homemade lunch, turkey and brie on broche roll, remains untouched. Now that Principal Kim is on board as Hoop Group's permanent chaperone, a full season is once again possible, and Tamika doesn't have time to eat. She's on mission to lure kids back to the program and turn them into a team again. Chris is holding court with three other former hoop groupers when Tamika strolls up to their table and takes a seat. I just had a talk with Principal Kim, she says, her voice devoid of emotion. Hoop group is back on and official tryouts are in 2 days. Chris places his bag of plain potato chips back on his tray and turns his body toward Tamika. Who are you talking to? I'm obviously talking to y'all, Tamika says as she waves her hand in a circular motion in front of the four boys. Nah, you can't be talking to us. We already got a team. Tamika cocks her head to the side, as if the misunderstanding is simply the result of not hearing Chris properly. What team? Chris smiles, his lips dripping with disdain. Oh, you ain't heard? My pops started a new program, down at the Y. It's called the Ballers, and it's the best basketball program in Lorraine. Tamika feels heat rising in her chest and stands up from the table. I hate to break it to you, Chris continues, but Hoop Group is washed. Anybody who's worth anything is down with the Ballers. Chris looks at the boys gathered around him like pigeons, angling from a single cube of bread. Y'all feel me, right? There is a chorus of yups and for sures, but Tamika can't hear any of it. The warmth has risen to her face, and her brain is furiously trying to salvage her own comeback from the wreckage of her Hoop Group hopes. She opens her mouth, ready to annihilate Chris and his minions, but she is stunned when the words she hears next aren't hers, they're Anthony's. So anybody who's worth anything is playing with the Ballers, he says, stepping up to the table and towering over a still-seated Chris. Tell me why you are on the team, then. 'Cause last time we saw you, you definitely didn't look like much of a baller. Chris is on his feet now, too, smirking and posturing as his entourage looks on. Tamika takes notes of the oohs that trickle over her from nearby tables as she steps up for Anthony. Bold, like the 6-inch difference means nothing. I know you ain't talking, big boy, Chris says. You're the one who's 10 feet tall and still can't make a layup. This is enough to elicit a full-on uproar from Chris's table. His boys slap fives in praise of the fearless leader while Tamika watches as Anthony's face gathers into an angry scowl. I never said I was a baller. That's what you say about yourself, Anthony says. It's just the same Jaden ate you so bad you had to run home and cry to your daddy about it. Chris shrugs. Yeah, okay, then a pause. But at least I can run home and cry to daddy. In an instant, the cafeteria falls silent. Even way across the room where the cheer squad has been engaged in a rather loud back and forth about the article in the new issue of Ceci magazine. Everyone is waiting for Anthony's next move. Already, there were only a couple of feet separating the two boys, but Anthony closes them quickly, his eyes tight and focused. Still want to be Floyd Mayweather, huh? Chris says, refusing to back down. Go ahead and hit me then, so I can tell Principal Kim your little punishment ain't working. He shakes his head and turns to Tamika. You might want to tell your guard dog to back up before you end up with only 2 players in Hoop Group. In a flash, Tamika steps in between Chris and Anthony and, with all the strength she can muster, shoves Anthony away from Chris's table. Everybody just stop, she says. This is the second time she's seen Chris push someone to the edge like this. And after seeing Anthony outside of Principal Kim's office, she is worried that Chris might have pushed Anthony a little too far. Tamika leads Anthony to an empty table far from Chris and his cronies. Once they're out of earshot and Anthony's breathing has returned to normal, with softness in her heart and her eyes, she says, What the heck is going on with you? That morning, when Anthony told Tamika he'd talk to her later, he hadn't imagined that later would come so soon. Neither had he imagined that Chris King would try him like that in front of half of the 7th grade. But life changes like the cafeteria runs out of bacon during free breakfast, quickly and frequently. So with no other option, Anthony takes a deep breath and tells Tamika everything. He tells her what happened at the end of the last school year, how he'd asked if Tyson Rowley was going to finish his lunch, even though he didn't actually want Tyson's stupid bologna sandwich. When Tyson gave it up, and somehow the sandwich wasn't enough. It was just too easy. Anthony asked Tyson for his homework next, then his phone. All of it dropped in Anthony's lap with no resistance, no pushing or pulling, none of the drama he was used to at home. It made Anthony snap. He hadn't meant to, not really. He just wanted Tyson to tell him to stop, to put up even half a fight, but he didn't. He wouldn't. Tyson just kept on giving in, so Anthony resorted to the only other thing he could do. He split Tyson's lip and sent Tyson to the hospital with a possible concussion. When he finishes the story, Anthony says nothing about the shock on Tamika's face, how her cocoa-colored eyes are now wide and unblinking. Instead, he tells her about Principal Kim's commitment to working with kids who've been in trouble before, even when it seems like those kids have nothing left to work with. Principal Kim says that helping kids will become well-functioning people outside of the classroom is just as important as teaching them math and science inside of it. So, in addition to making him join hoop group, she meets with Anthony twice a week to talk about whatever's on his mind. "What do y'all talk about?" Tamika says. Anthony sighs and rubs a large hand over his forehead. "I don't know. Mostly my dad, I guess. Lately, Anthony's dad has been drunk far more than when he's sober. He comes stumbling home on the evening, sweaty and belligerent, after he's stopped at some bar and spent money he doesn't have on liquor he doesn't need. It wasn't always like that, though. Back when Anthony's dad was a staff accountant at the local children's hospital, when it was his job to make sure families paid their kids' medical bills. He was home by 6 o'clock and spent most of his evenings cradling a bottle of cherry Coke. He had a tendency to anger them, too, but his rage was always restrained, never reckless. Then Anthony's dad got laid off, and not being able to pay his own family's bills seemed to break something inside of him. All at once, everything changed. The arguments between Anthony's parents about money, about Anthony, about the daytime drinking, grew increasingly violent one day. One ugly, dreary day in the middle of January, Anthony's dad got so mad that he pushed Anthony's mom down a flight of stairs. She was paralyzed instantly. The following weeks were a blur of police officers, caseworkers, and family therapists because Anthony's father said the fall was an accident, and his mother agreed. No charges were pressed. But that still couldn't save their family from chaos that consumed them. Anthony's little brother, Beans, was shipped off to live with an aunt in Atlanta, while Anthony stayed behind, pledging to protect his mother no matter what. Anthony stops talking now and takes in air slowly through his mouth, willing his body to calm. Of all the terror and trauma, this is the part of the story that triggers him the most. Even though he's the one telling it, he never feels like the story belongs to him. If he's honest, his mother's fall and never-ending fallout feel like someone else's nightmare, even if they both continue to haunt his every walking hour. Anthony counts his breaths just like Principal Kim taught him to. 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000, then he continues. For a while, Anthony tells Tamika his dad was so overcome with regret and grief and the drinking stopped. But with his mom in a wheelchair and unable to work, the pressure on Anthony's dad soon began to snowball. He started working around the clock, collecting trash here, painting houses there, and doing whatever he could to keep the lights on and the fridge at least halfway full. Thankfully, Anthony's dad is able to take care of the family's basic necessities, but there's little money left at the end of the month. For him, there's even less life. Over the last 6 or 7 months, Anthony's dad's frustration has been pooling, gathering like a slowly warming pot of water that is moments away from bubbling over. Now that the drinking has started back up again, so too have the outbursts. And now that Anthony's mom has lost all independence and ability to fight back, most of these outbursts are directed toward Anthony. Principal Kim says that Anthony's dad is just disappointed in himself and his circumstances, that he feels helpless and unable to change things for the better. Anthony wants to believe her, but his instinct is to blame himself when his father lashes out. After all, his grades haven't been great, and he struggles to stay out of trouble. All of this just places more stress on his family. He believes, so he absorbs his father's rage and stuffs it within. There it festers until, as with any wound left unhealed, it gets infected and seeps out, rotten and stinking, for everyone to see. When Anthony finally looks up after talking for what feels like hours, he half expects Tamika to have run away, but she remains, with care and empathy etched into her perfectly beautiful brown skin. "I'm really sorry," Anthony says. "I didn't mean to talk so much. I'm sure you probably didn't want to hear—" "No, I'm glad you told me," Tamika says, gently interrupting. "And I'm so sorry you have to deal with all that." Her lips spread into a smile. "I know it probably doesn't mean much since you're not really into basketball, but I'm glad that you're in hoop group. Really, and this is going to be the best hoop group season ever. I promise." In the next moment, the bell rings to signal the end of lunch period, and Anthony watches as Tamika offers one last smile, throws her bag over her shoulder, and rushes off down the hall. He watches as she blends in so effortlessly with the other middle schoolers, all the other kids whose lives must be 10 times better than his. Anthony watches them, but he doesn't move. He doesn't move because he is frozen, weighted by the gravity of Tamika's judgment-free acceptance.